What's going on, guys? I'm Zach from the Lumios Post, where we talk about all things Pokemon, and today we will be talking about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's connections to Legends Arceus. Legends Arceus released at the very beginning of 2022, and then Scarlet and Violet dropped much later in 2022, but in a lot of ways, Legends Arceus kind of teased things that were to come in Scarlet and Violet, and that became even more clear after Scarlet and Violet released, and we could obviously deep dive into both games. But yeah, so this is going to be covering the kind of big things that came out of Legends Arceus that were also teasing things to come in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Now, before we begin, I am very, very curious to hear your thoughts. Which did you think was the better game, Pokemon Legends Arceus or Scarlet and Violet? They're obviously very different games. They're kind of like comparing apples to oranges. I prefer Scarlet and Violet purely just because that's player versus player, and that is a huge part of the games for me. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts, so do drop that below. Now let's get into it. So first we have that the starter combinations, or rather the second type given to the starters, were the exact same. So it just swapped around a little. So in Legends Arceus, the Hisuian starters, Hisuian Samurott, Typhlosion, and Decidueye, their secondary typings were Dark, Fighting, and Ghost. Well, now we have Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and the secondary typings of the Paldean starters are Dark, Fighting, and Ghost. Now, Skeledirge and Hisuian Typhlosion actually have the exact same typings, Fire and Ghost, and now for Quaquaval and Meowscarada, they just swapped around their typings. Hisuian Samurott was Water Dark, Quaquaval is instead Water Fighting, Hisuian Decidueye was Grass Fighting, Meowscarada is Grass Dark, but still, those typings were the same thing. You could also take this starter thing a little bit further and say that these Pokemon are starter Pokemon from other regions. In Legends Arceus, we learned that the starters are from other regions. Oshawott, Rowlet, and Cyndaquil are not native to Hisui. They were brought by the professor from his travels to other regions, and we actually got confirmation in Scarlet and Violet that Quaxly, at least, is not originally from Paldea. And looking at its origins, this could very well be the case with Fuecoco as well. And while I don't think it's the case with Sprigatito, you certainly could make the argument purely because Sprigatito is kind of the odd man out here, with Fuecoco and Quaxly both being from other regions. Perhaps Sprigatito was too. So yeah, definitely a connection there. Now, these weren't the only Pokemon to hint at Pokemon to come later. So we have the Kami Quartet. Now, obviously, Landorus, Tornadus, and Thundurus were around long before the days of Legends Arceus. However, Legends Arceus kind of brought them back and gave them like their own side quest or whatever, and even gave them a new member, Enamorus, making them go from a trio to a quartet. They're 4 Pokemon. And you see, these Pokemon are based off of Chinese mythology, and of course are very Chinese in their design inspirations and everything. So same thing with Scarlet and Violet. We get 4 sub-legendaries in these games, the Treasures of Ruin, and they are Chinese in origin and based off of Chinese things, and are even said to come from a region that is east of Paldea, very clearly hinting at China. And to compare this to Hisui, it's said that Enamorus comes from a land overseas in Legends Arceus that could also very well be China. So it's very interesting that they kind of did a whole Chinese sub-legends plot and even made these Chinese sub-legends a quartet, made 4 of them, and then the same thing would come in Scarlet and Violet, a 4-membered quartet sub-legends that is Chinese in origin. So very, very interesting, but it still doesn't stop there. In Legends Arceus, we also got some true evolutions to Pokemon. So not regional evolutions, not like Galarian Farfetch'd evolves into Sirfetch'd, but a true evolution. Things like Electabuzz evolving into Electivire. We got this for Stantler, now evolving into Weirdeer, Ursaring evolving into Ursaluna, and Scyther, excuse me, now being able to evolve instead of into Scizor, into Kleavor instead. So that is very interesting. And the thing about this was, this hadn't been done since Generation 6, with Eevee being able to evolve into Sylveon. And before that, it hadn't been done since Generation 4. So it had been a long time since we had seen true evolutions to older Pokemon. And yet, Legends Arceus wasn't the last we saw of it. Scarlet and Violet gave us evolutions for Primeape, Dunsparce, Girafarig, and Bisharp in the forms of Annihilape, Dunsparce, Farigiraf, and Kingambit. So it's very interesting, and something interesting to note here too is that there was a lot of Gen 2 love in Legends Arceus in terms of the Pokemon they gave this to. You know, they gave this to Ursaring, a Gen 2 Pokemon, and to Stantler, another Gen 2 Pokemon. And then we see in Scarlet and Violet, they gave it to Girafarig, a Gen 2 Pokemon, and kind of in a lot of ways, a almost counterpart to Stantler, and to Dunsparce, another Gen 2 Pokemon. And then, also interestingly enough, a lot of their regional evolutions were for Gen 2 as well. You know, we had Sneasel now being able to evolve into Sneasler through its Hisuian form, and the same thing happened in Scarlet and Violet. Our one regional evolution was Clodsire evolving from Paldean Wooper, another Gen 2 Pokemon. So that is very, very interesting. Now to talk about a Pokemon that was a hint, but also kind of isn't. We have this weird Magikarp pot thing. There were multiple pots that had like a little Magikarp design on them in Jubilife Village, but there is one that is not Magikarp. It is some other fish Pokemon. Now, the interesting thing about this is that in Scarlet and Violet, Magikarp, we know this from the data mine, was originally supposed to have a Convergent Evolution, so like Wiglet and Toedscool. Instead of Toedscool being a thing, it was going to be a regional variant for Magikarp, or not a regional variant, excuse me, a Convergent Evolution to Magikarp. So this obviously got scrapped, but it's very possible, maybe not likely, but possible that this pot design is actually a design of that scrapped Magikarp Convergent Evolution. I imagine it was scrapped because this is still a fish, and Magikarp's a fish, and they like to go a little bit more jumpy, if you will, with the Convergent Evolutions, with Diglett being a mole, but Wiglet being an eel, you know, Tentacool being a jellyfish, Toedscool being a mushroom, so Magikarp being a fish, and this Convergent being a fish kind of, you know, isn't as big of a leap, so it's not as interesting, and that may have even been why it got scrapped altogether, but very interesting stuff. Now we have some themes that are very present in Legends Arceus that carried over into Scarlet and Violet. So first off, open world. Now Legends Arceus isn't completely open world. It's more segmented open world where you get like one map that you can load up at a time, you know, up to 5. Whereas Scarlet and Violet is just straight up, once you get to Mesa Gozo, you can access it all. You know, some places harder than others, depending on what forms of Koraidon or Miraidon you've unlocked. But the point is that it was clearly them stepping towards Scarlet and Violet. And I think they were even kind of trying to prepare us for it, with Sword and Shield being very, very semi-open world, with, you know, one open world area being the wild area. Them diving into that concept a little bit more in Sword and Shield's DLC, the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra, and then giving us Legends Arceus, which is a much bigger leap in the space of open world, until finally giving us our own open world game with Gen 9 Scarlet and Violet. So, again, really, really cool, but also, you know, you could look at the features, the ride features, if you will, in Scarlet and Violet, and say they also came from Legends Arceus. In Legends Arceus, you had a climber and Sneasler, which functioned very similar to how Koraidon and Miraidon climb. Same thing with their gliding with Hisuian Braviary, though Hisuian Braviary was a much better glider than Koraidon and Miraidon. You had your kind of dasher with Weird Ear, and you had your swimmer with Basilegion. Now, Legends Arceus did have Ursaluna to look for items. We don't have that with Koraidon, Miraidon, but either way, it is kind of another thing that they had hinted at. And lastly, we have the whole time thing. Legends Arceus is set in the past, and your character is even sent there. Like at the beginning, we see that your character's from the present, but is sent to the past. Well, in Scarlet and Violet, you don't go to the past and future, but certainly those themes are very much at play, and you do see Pokemon that traveled from the past or the future, and you even meet professors who travel to the past or the future, depending on the version you play. So there you have it, guys. Be sure to let me know in the comments below which of these games was your favorite and why. Be sure to also like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our future breakdown videos. You know, these are kind of, I guess, Easter eggs of Legends Arceus, and I want to do a big Easter egg video on Scarlet and Violet soon. So if that's something that interests you, subscribe, hit the bell. It'll help you see it when it comes out. So until next time, I will see all of you later.